Coming up on today's show.
So why don't me and you work on like a banner that we can hold up at the concert, just so maybe for 1 second she'll look in our direction. And so I came up with this idea and I thought, maybe this would work as a quilt. And so that was my first pixel quilt, was Billie Elish. If Billie was the one that kind of opened the door to pixel quilts for me, Post Malone was the one that I was like, this is an amazing process. I love it. And I want to do something with it. And so that's where it all began, basically. I think showing them how easy it is to do this. You think as a quilter that these are really complex, and they're actually easier than most quilts that people make.
Hi there, I'm April Paige, breaking down the what, when, where, and how creatives get their inspiration. I'm a big fan of the cursey words, and I've been a creative for 30 plus years in marketing and fine art. This is where creatives unite to break down the facts of creative life. Buckle up, let's get lost in the world of creativity together. Welcome everyone to Artist Antics with April, where we talk to creatives about creativity. And today I am very excited to sit down to talk to internationally recognized pixel quilter. And she's also an educator for workshops, retreats, classes, and a speaker. Dee, welcome Dee.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Yes, thanks for coming. I'm so excited. I saw your quilt at the QuiltCon in Raleigh. I went there for inspiration. And before I start asking you questions, I just want to talk about my amazement with how quilts have come from squares and triangles that I'm used to seeing to these beautiful, they look like paintings to me, that are images that are not only just well made and put together and very thoughtful in the design and the perspective, but then the overlay of all the intricate stitching over top as another layer for these pieces. I was just flabbergasted at how amazing they were. So I went to the art space downtown, and they had some of them in the art space, and they told me about QuiltCon, and I was like, well, I'm gonna go. I'm just gonna go. So I went, and that's when I saw your quilt and reached out to you, because I was like, oh my God, I hope she comes on my show, because you were the number one that I really wanted on. So I was really happy about that.
That means a lot, because there were so many beautiful quilts there. And I think QuiltCon really showcases these quilts as an art form. Instead of, if you're not in the quilting world, and especially in the modern quilting world, then I think it's quite easy not to know the level of detail and intricacy that these quilts have.
I didn't know until I got there, and I must have looked like a lost child, because I was just like, oh my gosh. I was just looking everywhere, dumbfounded. I couldn't even speak. People were like, are you okay? And I'm like, I'm good. Just absorbing what I'm saying right now. Oh my gosh, it was the whole conference, the whole convention center, wall to wall, and the walls in between just was fascinating. It was so amazing. Anyway, so let's get started. I have so many questions I prepared, because I really want to dive into this. So I love asking everybody your initial spark for the love of creating quilts. I don't know how there's another medium before that, but I'd love to hear that story, because everyone's heard my story a million times about, I was a child, I was just supported by my family, my parents, who were all very much creatives, and that's kind of where it all came from. And then I just took off from there. So where did the spark come from?
It's funny. I do remember having a spark of creativity as a child. My mum actually owned a craft shop. So creativity was all around me. But I do remember distinctly when I was 10 years old, so this is when my mum had her craft shop, I remember doing some kind of craft project at school. And I remember the teacher looking at it and then looking at me and going, you're not creative like your mum, are you?
Oh.
And I think at that point, I just well, I guess not. And honestly, I didn't go near anything creatively until I had my daughter when I was 26. Wow. And it was having her that sparked something in me that I wanted to create something for her. And that's really what started this journey. But it took me, from 10 till 26, I really didn't do anything.
Wow. I think that's a good point for the people listening to us, that you got to be really mindful of what you say to the children around you, because it really can affect their whole lives. And just that one comment from one person saying you're not creative, when look at what you've done now, it's obvious you are. So we all have to be mindful of what we're saying to the kids, to the little ones. But it's also good, I'm sure you shared this with your daughter, because it's good for them to see what our passions are, so they can say, oh, mom's being really creative and maybe I can do something. Or they take it to a different medium for themselves, but it just gives them the hope that they can. No, that's
Well,
great.
and I saw in Maddie, my daughter, just a natural creativity that I think we all have. And then I hope she'll say it's something that I've nurtured, because I
Mm.
never wanted her to have that experience. And you've gone down a completely different path. She loves drawing and
Mm.
painting and all that kind of stuff, which I love. She's not really interested in sewing or quilting or anything at this age. But I think sometimes when you've got a parent that does that, sometimes it's just, my mum was really good at decorating cakes and baking, and so it was like that was her thing, and I just kind of stayed away from it. But no, if she ever shows any kind of passion in wanting to learn how to quilt, then I'd be more than happy.
My grandmother is a seamstress and her sister also, and they actually made my wedding dress when I got married back in the
Oh,
day. And we
how
had
special.
very, it was really special. And I have fond memories of going after work every day to sew on the lace by hand. And we were sewing the beading by hand for 5 months. We did that. So,
Wow.
but I really appreciate that time with them. It was like the three of us and just talking about life. And it was great, great memory. But she used to make me when I was young pick a pattern when there used to be pattern stores and go pick a fabric. And I'd have to sew my own outfit for the summer. And that would be the project I had to work on. But it wasn't like your daughter, it wasn't my thing.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't inspiring me. I was
Mm-hmm.
about art, and
Mm-hmm.
ever since I could hold a crayon in my hand, and everybody kind of knew that already.
Yeah.
But oh, that's great. So, how did you get to this pixelated imagery like that as your signature style? Or I assume it's your signature style. I shouldn't make that assumption. Has your style evolved to this, or?
Well, I started quilting 20 years ago, and I never loved it. It was always a process. I think coming from always going into something creatively and thinking you're not creative, you're going to struggle with this. I never really loved the process.
Mm,
And I always, even though I loved the end result, because quite often hundreds of quilts I made in that time, they were gifts. But actually going through the process, I would always beat myself up so much that that wasn't straight enough, or maybe that triangle was a little bit off. And so, but I would just struggle through to get to the end result. Well, I think it was 2020. I wanted to do a project to help my daughter, inspire my daughter, because she was in quite a dark place. We'd just moved from England to back to America. And it was just mid-pandemic. We'd had a really harsh lockdown in England, and she really hadn't been able to say goodbye to her friends or anything, or we didn't spend any time with family. She missed her final year at school. It was a
yeah.
big year, and everything was shut down. And one of the final things we were supposed to do in England before we came over to America, moved back to America, was we were supposed to go to a Billie Elish concert for her. And of course, that was cancelled. So when we moved over here, then she had to take on board meeting new people and making new friends and not being in a very good place, in a very good headspace. And so I was just trying to inspire her creatively. And I said to her, look, as soon as Billie announces new dates, we're going to go to that concert. So why don't me and you work on like a banner that we can hold up at the concert, just so maybe for 1 second she'll look in our direction. And so I came up with this idea, and I thought maybe this would work as a quilt. And so that was my first pixel quilt, was Billie Elish.
Wow.
And it was the first time that during the process of making the quilt that I enjoyed it. And while I was making it, I was already thinking in my head, what's my next one going to be? So I
Wow.
was loving every part of the process, which was completely new to me. I'd always just labored through it. And
That's
so
when you're hitting on something, but go ahead. Yeah.
so that was the point that I was like, you know what? I want to see where this can go, because I hadn't really seen many other people do it.
Mm.
And so as I was finishing up Billie, I put her online, just didn't have a Pixel Quilt account or anything by then, just into my family and friends, and everyone went a little bit crazy. And I was thinking, oh wow, people are really reacting well to this. And so I remember speaking to my daughter and saying, I want to do another one, but I want to make sure that I really push it this time and see if this process can handle a lot of detail. And so I wanted to do a more complicated face. And the face that she suggested, because she also loved him as much as she loved Billie, was Post Malone.
I saw that on your site. Yes.
He's complicated because he's got so many tattoos. Well, this was 2021. And I look at the picture I use now and I'm like, oh my goodness, he looks like a baby, because he's actually got significantly more tattoos on his face now.
Right.
But if Billy was the one that opened the door to Pixel Quilts for me, Post Malone was the one that I was like, this is an amazing process. I love it. And I want to do something with it. And so I just, that's where it all began, basically.
That's awesome.
Mhm.
Where did you get the original idea to do it pixeled?
I just kind of thought, if you're going to be doing a banner and it's fabric, well, quilts are fabric, so surely this could work as well. And so just ended up going down this tunnel
Right.
of, what could I do this?
Right.
And then since then I've tested if there's a website, if there's a software that can pixelate things, if
Yeah.
there's anything, then I've tried it out, because I'm like, I just need to simplify the process. I just want it simplified. So
I think for putting that option on your site, that's really helpful for those of us listening, whether it's quilt or non-quilts. You can go on Dee's website, pixelquilts.com, and put up an image, and for $15 get that image back pixelated so you can do whatever you want with it. So
yeah.
thank you for that. I did mine, but I did have a question because I didn't export it yet or purchase it yet, because I wanted to know if I want it, because I know it comes in a huge size and I do paintings that are much smaller. I'd be able to size it once I get that image, right? I assume I can size it based
So
on.
you can crop the image however you want it. And then at the
Mhm.
moment, there's two options. There's this size of quilt, which is a medium. So this is 72 by 54, or there's a large version, which is 92 by 74.
Right.
And I'm just playing with the wall hanging size at the moment. The trouble is, the smallest pixel on the medium is 1.25 inches, which when you sew
Right.
it together, it sews up at 3/4 of an inch. So when
Right.
you start going down,
Right. You lose
things get
detail.
tinier and tinier.
Or you lose detail, one or the other, if you don't size the squares. Yeah.
So I'm just working on it would be like a wall hanging baby quilt option. But because the pieces will be so tiny at that point, I think you would only be able to put it together. There's a couple of different ways you can piece these things. And one of
Yeah.
them is that you use this grid interfacing, and you cut all your pieces and then you just press them on this grid interfacing. Then you can just fold it and sew in strips.
Oh,
And I think when you start getting down to tiny, tiny pieces, that's the only way you're going to really want to do it, because
right.
otherwise you'd just drive yourself crazy, I think.
That makes it much easier than getting all the corners exactly
Mhm.
correct, for sure. So, have you ever seen Salvador Dali's piece called Lincoln? Have you ever seen that piece?
It sounds familiar.
I'll
If
have
I
to
saw
send it
it,
to
I'd
you.
probably
You'd probably know. It's one of his more obscure pieces, so I'm not trying to
Mhm.
test you or anything. But the only reason I asked that is because he pixelated, it's a giant painting, and he pixelated Lincoln, and his wife is in the middle, naked, looking out onto a sea or lake. And so you think when you're walking up that it's this woman looking out on a lake, and there's just these squares all around. But if you step far enough back,
Okay.
it all comes into view and you can see Lincoln's face, right?
Mhm.
So I know it's an illusion, but I just thought I'd mention it to you. I'll send it to you when we're done because it's really
Yeah, I'd love to see
cool.
that. Well, it's exactly the same concept. If you get up
Yeah.
close to these things, you have no idea what they are. And I've seen people at shows stand in front of them and just be like, I've got nothing. I don't know what this is. And
Yeah.
if I'm there, I'll say to them, get your phone out and look at it through your camera. And then all of
Yes,
a sudden it just comes to life.
that's it. And or if you squint your
Yeah,
eyes,
you can squint as well.
it does the same thing. Yes, I think it's super cool. And I don't want to share any top secrets, but what tools, software in particular, if you want to share, if you don't want to share, that's okay,
Mhm.
do you use when you're creating these pixel quilts?
So I basically tested everything that was on the market, and then I've come up with my own system, which is on my website. So this is what's working in the background when you're testing out pictures on my website.
Yep.
So I've been working with the development team for it'll be 4 years next month,
Oh, wow.
and I basically said to them, "This is what I want, and how long do you think it'll take, and how much do you think it'll be?" And they said 60 days. And then I think we're 4 times the amount of the price they told me at the
All
time.
construction is.
So they are the ones that I've worked with to get everything to where it is now. And it's
Well,
so funny because I will still go back to them now and I'll go, can we just tweak this? Can we
yep.
just tweak this? And
You
they'll
sound
go, Dee, that's not a tweak. That's an algorithm rewrite. We have to rewrite the whole thing.
like
And I'm like, you're such divas, aren't you? Just a little
yeah,
tweak.
I feel the same way when I talk to my graphics person. I just want this to do that. Just we have to redo the whole thing. And I'm like, oh,
That's no
yeah,
fun.
no. Well, good for you that you're venturing out to create this tool of your own. That's phenomenal. Congratulations. I know it's still ongoing and probably always will be, but I
And
know
I'm
that's
not, I think it's been one of those things that if someone had told me, because they said usually 60 days and this is 4 years on, if someone had said, actually, the reality is it's going to be this amount and it's going to take this amount of time, I don't know that I would have done it, you know?
right.
So
Yeah.
it's almost like that I didn't know
No.
about.
Yep. Same way with building a business.
Oh,
People step out in the middle because they're like, I can't do it.
mm-hmm,
But so I wanted to talk about your themes, not just Post Malone, but Oprah, Sinead, Zelensky behind
mm-hmm,
you. I know you have a lot of holiday stuff too, things that are more, I don't know what you would call them, more holiday ish,
mm-hmm.
for lack of a better term, but more generic, I guess, is what I wanted to say than actual people. But what are the themes that inspire you, and why did you don't have to go into each one, but why do you choose the people that you choose?
I think it started with Maddie and who was inspiring her.
Yeah.
And then I actually, when I wanted to push myself and I just started this process, I blocked out a year and I thought, I'm going to do one pixel quilt a month of a woman who has inspired me.
Mm,
And I'm going to make this quilt and I'm going to send it to her. That was the plan. And the only stipulation was that I wasn't allowed to choose some friends and family because I
right.
thought there's no winning that game. There's always going to
Yes.
be.
No.
And so I was able to really sit down and go, well, who does inspire me? In the first month, I chose Ashley Longshaw, the artist, and made a pixel quilt of her. And so it's all different things. Like her in particular, I had never seen her art, and then I saw her on television, and I remember walking past the television, and she was on it, and I just stopped in my tracks, and I was just like, who is this woman? Who is this force of nature? Because
Right.
she was just wild and funny, but creative. And I was completely mesmerized. So I remember doing a deep dive into her, and then I love her art now, obviously. And
Mhm.
so I've managed to pull inspiration from authors. Brene Brown is another one that I did a quilt of, and then I
Love
sent it to her. Martha Beck, when I started that year, Martha Beck wasn't even on, like, even someone I knew. And then I kept hearing podcasts with her. And so I bought her book, and her book, The Way of Integrity, just completely floored me. And so she ended up being one of the women I did that year.
her.
And then just people like Zelensky. This is the second different Zelensky quilt I've made. I've actually made two of these though,
Okay.
because I wanted to see if I could gift one to his wife. And so when I knew it was going to have to be sent to QuiltCon, I actually made exactly the same quilt because I always want one on hand in case I ever hear from her and I can send it to her.
Right.
But I think a lot of the people I do music because I think that is something that I find hugely inspiring, and just creative, bold, brave people.
Yes.
I find a lot of inspiration from them as well.
No, that's beautiful. Beautiful that you're doing what, is passionate within you and it's coming out in your work. That's really, really something. I appreciate that. So let's flop over to the process and technique. So how does it just walk us through, you don't have to go through every step from concept to finished quilt. What are some of the main steps in there? So you think of, you want to do a Sinead O'Connor
Mm-hmm.
piece, and then you find the picture, and then where does that go from there?
So the Amy Winehouse quote I made, she's a really good example of the
Mm,
process because you have to start from a place where you go out and you get anywhere between 5 to 10 images of that person, and you test each one in the system because some will work as a pixel quilt and others
mm,
you'll know straight away that doesn't work. And quite often the ones that don't work are the ones that they've got a lot of shadowing on their face, because any kind of shadowing gets rid of the detail that you need, and you need that detail in order for that face to read exactly who it is. But one
mhm.
of my favorite Amy Winehouse pictures, I was putting it in and it looked amazing, and it was almost the one I went with. And I took a break And then I came back to it and I realized that she looked a bit like Lady Gaga. They have similar noses. And at that point I knew I can't use that image, because if it's not reading completely as Amy, then I can't use it.
Right. Right.
And so I just test a lot of different images before I land on one that really sings. I think if you're struggling, if you're putting an image in and you're struggling, is this working or isn't it? Take a break and come back to it and try and see it with fresh eyes, or take a photograph of it and send it to someone. I've done that a few times. I've taken a photograph of a quilt I'm working on and said, who is this? And if it comes back as, well, that's Billie Elish, I'm like, I'm all right. But as soon as you've chosen your image, then the system, it translates it into exact shades of fabric that you need to buy and tells you the fabric line, and then tells you of how much you need to buy of each different fabric. And then it breaks this is chaperone.
Cool.
And it just breaks it down into blocks, and then
Right.
that makes it easy. So each time you're just following one page. You're
Right.
getting all the pieces for one page, and one page equates to one whole row. And then you just have to trust the process at that stage and pick up the right
Right.
colors.
Have you ever had that happen where there's one that's not right?
Yeah,
Not,
especially in the early days when we were
yeah.
testing, I thought I'd put all the correct fabric, because you have to individually, some fabric lines have 360 colors. You have to go
Yeah.
in and individually put all that in, and RGB and everything. And there was a few I didn't get right. And
Mm.
actually, the Sinead O'Connor quilt, there was some shades on that I was like, this just isn't right. And I had to re-go through that whole fabric line and see, and then go back to my developers and go, right, these are the colors that they're not working out right. We need to change these. And so, but the amazing thing about quilts is that you make a mistake, you just unpick it and redo it. There's
Oh,
nothing
yeah.
you can do that
Yeah.
will ruin it.
It's a little more forgiving than painting. Because,
Yeah.
I mean, in certain cases, you can paint over things, but it depends on what you're using. In
Mm-hmm.
oils, it's not so easy. But
Yeah. Yes.
hey, real quick, every other week I sit down with real working creatives, no filters, no fluff, just the truth about what it actually takes to build a life through creativity. If that's the kind of content you want more of, please subscribe. It's free. So you never miss a conversation that might just change how you see your own creative path. And I also share painting videos and videos talking about meaning behind each one of my art pieces. So drop a comment below. Tell me what's resonating. Tell me what you want to hear next. This channel's growth is because you show up for us, and I very much appreciate it. And now let's get back to the good stuff. So, what kind of sewing machine do you use? What are the brands that you use? And you learn different reasons. We can even get into scissors and pens. I know I have a really nice pair of sewing scissors that I inherited from my grandmother. But
Oh, I love that.
so just want to hear for all of those that might want to know the different brands you're using.
So sewing machines, we have a local shop here in Tulsa that I bought my first sewing machine from over 20 years ago, and it happened to be a Baby Lock. And so ever since then, I've just owned Baby Locks. I think in the last 20 years, I've probably had 9 different Baby Locks, and that's because I've then bought a Baby Lock Serger, and I've got a Baby Lock
Right.
long arm. And so I have always stuck with that brand because their price point is good, and they just make sewing so easy. It's like going from being in a very old manual car, stick shift, to
Yep.
then driving this souped up, lovely automatic machine. That's what my Baby Locks are now. So I only use Baby Locks for everything now. In terms of cutting implements, I'm so cheap that I just buy what was on special offer. And
Right.
then about a year ago, I was at a quilt retreat, and my friend had bought a pair of these scissors. And she said to me, Dee, you've got to try these scissors. And I said to her, I'm not really into scissors. I don't really care. She's like, no, Dee, just try it. And I was like, well, I don't really care. And she's like, Dee,
Right.
please. And so I tried these scissors, and I was like, oh my gosh, they're amazing.
Yes. Once you use the really good ones like that, it's like everything else is just, it doesn't compare ever.
So I say that they're Kai scissors, Kai. I say they're the only scissors that have ever got me excited about pairs of
Yeah.
scissors. And now if I have to use anything other than Kai, I'm a bit like, it's
Yours
ruined
is
me. They've ruined me for life.
now. How about the mats and the rolling cutters? Do you use any of those, or do you not like those?
Because I'm having to cut a lot of fabrics for workshops and things, I needed a really, really long one. So I've just bought, there's a company called The Big Mat. And so I've just bought one of their mats and I've cut like 2 quilts on it and I love that. In terms of rotary cutters or anything like that, I'm not really brand specific. I always seem to go back to Whiskers, which is kind of the brand that Joanne's used to sell. And I think that's just because right from the word go, that was the brand I had, and that's the one I'm used to.
Yeah.
I'm more than happy to use any kind of rotary cutter.
That's great. Do you use them more? You use the scissors more when you're making your quilts or the rotary?
No, all rotary cutters. And then I do use, there's an AccuQuilt that brought out a die, which is a size pixels that I use. So you can use an AccuQuilt die as well, which is kind of nice because that really speeds up the process. And then I've been struggling a lot with repetitive strain injury in my wrists and my hands. So actually doing an AccuQuilt, cutting it out that way has been.
Yeah, so you just stamp it out and it cuts all 4 sides at once. Yeah, that's the way to go. So let's go over to teaching. What inspired you to start teaching and sharing your process? How did that happen?
That was the bit that I never expected, because I will always say to people, I'm not a teacher. But the trouble is when you niche yourself down so much and then that's all you focus on, then I just found that people were approaching me and wanting me to teach. And so my first class I did was probably kind of 3 years ago, and I was so nervous. And I still get so nervous when I teach, because in my head there's that little devil on my shoulder going, you're not a teacher, why are you doing this? But I think I've realized that people just want to know your process, and people just want to learn from you, and it's not necessarily all about you knowing how to teach perfectly. It's about you sharing, look, this is what I do. And what I try and do in my classes is, because I am not a type A quilter, I do this for my mental health and because it makes me happy. So if you go closely into my quilts, there's going to be wonky seams. It's a part of the who I am. But then I will always have type A quilters in my class that I know that if I'm like, oh, well, that doesn't matter, carry on, that's really going to stress them out. So I try and say, like, this is best practice, and then this is how I do it.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, no, it's funny you say that about delivering the message instead of making it about you. That's a mind trick I used to do when I spoke on stage, is to get me out of my nerves and to get me out of thinking everyone's judging me. I completely in my mind said they're here to learn what I'm about to teach them. It's not about me. I'm the vessel that is delivering the message. And it put so much pressure off of me when I did that. And it was a really good trick for anybody out there who's trying to speak or teach. But I'm curious to know, what's the difference between your classes, your workshops, or maybe those are one and the same, versus your retreats? What's the difference there? Yeah.
Classes, quite often at these quilt shows, they only give you 3 or 4 hours to deliver something. So the classes are almost like a little snippet. So I make people piece 2 blocks in my class. That's all I want from you, is that you're going to piece 2 blocks, one in the style that I usually do, where you have bigger pieces, and then one where we're going to use interfacing and you're going to cut every single pixel. Because all I'm wanting from this class is for you to go away and know the 2 ways you can create a pixel quilt, and knowing which way you prefer. So when you're doing day-long classes or when you're doing retreats, it just means you can put a lot more into that and just spend more time with everybody as well. And then the retreats I do, that it's just me teaching and that it's for a few days. We won't just do one project. So there will be a pixel quilt project in there, but then at a previous retreat, we also painted door hanging, because it was a nutcracker retreat. So it was very themed. And then we made a nutcracker doormat. So I like having different projects as well, because I think it's always nice to learn something new.
No, that's great that you're teaching them the 2 ways and not putting too much pressure on them to create something vast during that time. That's great. And the retreats are similar, just longer?
Longer. We explore different projects. Quite often at the retreats, I've got enough time to just sit with one-on-one with people and get them to show me photographs that they're like, well, usually if you talk to a quilter, as soon as you say this is a process that you can put your own image into, they have an idea of like, oh my goodness, I want to do this. I know this picture of my mum and dad. I know this picture of my dog. And so at retreats, I'm able to sit with them and say, well, let's try the image then. Let's see if it works,
Right.
and go through that whole process with them and create them their own pattern as well.
No, that's awesome. So if you want to share, what's one of the breakthrough moments you love seeing from one of your students in the past? Anything fun, funny, inspirational you want to share that you remember from one of your students?
I think showing them how easy it is to do this. You think as a quilter that these are really complex, and they're actually easier than most quilts that people make, because there's never a bias seam, there's never a tiny triangle. And so just breaking that down so that every quilter knows this is completely accessible, even if you're a quilter just beginning. Most recently, I had an experience that we have two pugs, Bella and Winky. And I knew I wanted to make a pixel quilt of an animal to prove that you can. And so I remember saying to my mum, do you think I should do Bella or do you think I should do Winky? And she said to me, Winky's got a lot of personality. Winky just had one eye. And so my little one-eyed pug. And so I developed a pattern, and then I bought all the fabric. And just before I started the Winky quilt, she died. She died
Oh,
just before Christmas. And so I had to do that quilt. It was really hard. It was really hard to do it, and it was really emotional. And I gave it to a lady that quilts for me. And I just said, I don't know how I want it quilted, but I just know I want it to be special. And she went away and she came up with a design that she designed for me that had Winky's name in it and a little paw print and a bone. And so it even just the way it was quilted was so special. And so having been through that process about 2 weeks ago, probably not even that, a lady sent me a photo of a little old black pug that she'd made a quilt out of. And she said to me, whilst I was making this, she died. And that it was just like, oh my
my
goodness,
God.
I know
Yeah.
exactly how that feels. And she did such an amazing job that I know how special that quilt's going to be to her now.
No, that's great. You can have that forever.
Mm-hmm.
And just out of my sheer curiosity, I know you do the stitching over top of the
Mm-hmm.
squares once the squares are together. Is that all programmed, or are you doing that by hand? How does that work?
So that is the actual quilting that's done on top of it. And all that's doing is sandwiching everything together and making sure it doesn't shift. There's various ways you can do that. You can do very simple, like straight lines, or there's meander you can do. I'm all right at meandering.
Yeah.
But the amazing thing about quilting is that you find quilters and they can either come up with designs for you that they program in their computerized system, and then it does it.
Mm-hmm.
Or there are other quilters that basically free motion. So they're
Yeah.
like artists that will free motion on top
Yep.
of it. And so you have these whole host of choices to make after you've actually made your quilt top. And how you get it quilted can add a whole nother level of detail to your
Yeah.
quilt. So I knew I wanted him quilted with sunflowers because that was the national flower of Ukraine.
Yeah.
And so me and my quilter just searched online and we found that sunflower pattern that already existed. And it was like, oh, fantastic, that's it. And
Awesome.
usually I will say to the quilter, because they'll say, what design do you want? And then what thread do you want? And most of the time I'm just like, you choose. And so that even if I do go with an idea and go, I want sunflowers, then she was like, well, what color of thread? I'm like, that's your expertise. You choose that one.
Very good. Wow, you're putting a lot of trust in your quilters.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So moving over to your business hat, I like asking these questions. You're an artist, entrepreneur, a teacher, speaker. How do you balance all of that with what you do? And any tips on anything to do with running the business or balance or whatever you want to share?
I did a very bad last year was just a very bad example of not balancing it at all.
Mm,
I said 2025 is my year of yes. So all those things that I'm terrified of, I'm just going to say yes to them and I'm just going to do it. And what I realized was that by the end of the year, the end of the year within 3 months, I'd had shingles twice.
oh no.
I was just completely exhausted. I'd almost lost my love
Oh my
of
God.
my passion because I just said yes to everything and I was completely worn out. What I was doing was people were coming to me saying, "Oh, have you thought about making a quilt of X person?" And I'm like, "Oh, that would be really good." And then I was doing it. So I was coming from a place of just taking on too much, being too busy, not looking after myself, traveling too much, and then actually making quilts, some of which I had no passion for.
Mm.
And this year I just thought I can't do that. I can't physically can't do that. So I need to be a bit more picky about what I say yes to now. And actually creatively, I need to get back to the things that drew me to this process to begin with. And so I just sat down and I thought, who am I passionate about? Who do I want to make a quilt of?
Right.
And just wrote a list, and then have gone in and slowly started creating those patterns and making those quilts and really getting back to the joy that brought me to this in the first place. Before, I was doing it for everybody else and not myself.
Mm.
I think the idea of owning your own business, it seems really good on paper. And the reality is that if I'd have put in this much work and this many hours for somebody else's business and was paid per hour, I'd be considerably more well off than I am now. Really hard to switch off. Just because it's a weekend, that doesn't stop me from looking at my emails and answering emails. And
No.
so
Preaching to the choir.
and so this year I'm trying to just be a lot more mindful that my kids are older. They're 20 and 22. They're both still at home now, but I know they're not going to be at home forever as well. So it's things like that that is stopping me from saying yes to everything now, and then being a lot more picky about what I'm creating. And just because somebody said this person's amazing, you should make a quilt of them, doesn't mean I should make a quilt of them.
No, I think that a message here for everyone listening to us is that no is a complete sentence, and you don't have to explain yourself. And sometimes if you feel like it, you can say, I just can't, I don't have the bandwidth for that right now. And if they push even further, that's when I get annoyed and be like, it's still no. I'm not going to explain all the things why, because they want to know why so that they can discount what you're saying. And oh, it won't take you that much time and all this stuff. And I'm just like, it's important to be able to say no and know what you want to do, but know how you want to spend your time too.
And know that people that are coming to you, and if they're not a quilter, if they're not a painter, if they're not a sculptor, they don't know what's involved.
Right.
So I'm sure you would like for me to make a quilt of that person, but you know what? That equates to about 100 hours of my time and about $400 or $500 of my money. And you don't know what you're asking.
No, I've had that happen with custom pieces. I had somebody who I worked with recently that wanted a custom piece, and they didn't really have a vision of what they wanted. So I started putting some things together, and landing on a final image is, I feel like, 50% of my work. After the image is approved, then I can start painting it. We've already figured out the colors and the image. I've just got to now put it on canvas and make it look as close as I can to what we agreed on. But 50% of the process is that go between several rounds of getting to land on something. And they wanted to back out before I started. And I said, well, you still owe me for that time. Sorry. You still owe me for the time I put in. You have to pay me for that. So anyway, I agree. I don't think people understand how much is involved. And then once I do the paintings, and I'm sure you feel this way, there's so many steps in between to getting to the final, to paint several layers, you do the varnish, get it wired and package it up, put all the paperwork together to send with it. It's a lot to put together, and I don't think they realize what's involved. They think it's just so easy. But
and the other thing that I've realized through just learning the hard way is that I have got to own my part of this process.
Yes.
And so if I'm working a collaboration with someone, then actually this is my part of the process, that we agree who it's going to be, but I have to find the image because I have to use an image that really speaks to me and that works. And then if you're my quilter, then I will give you the finished piece and you can do what you want with the quilting. But when I haven't done that in the past and I've allowed other people to dictate it should be this image, those are the quilts that I like the least. Actually, I struggle the most with, because I will say,
doesn't resonate with you.
the Sinead quilt, that wasn't an image I wanted to use.
Oh, interesting.
Which is crazy because she's lovely, but the image I wanted to use was the Nothing Compares to You video, very dark background, just shaven head. And so, but I didn't. and I was getting input elsewhere. And so it's just funny that usually now I can look back and go, quilts that I like, but that are not my favorites, are
Right.
generally the ones that part of the process of choosing the image is so fundamental to like me loving this quilt and knowing it's going to work, and the amount of time it takes to actually piece, you have to have that love for it as well. I can see that the ones where I haven't chosen the image are the ones I struggle with the most.
No, for sure. That's cool. So I have just a few rapid fire questions for you. Coffee or tea?
Coffee now, but if you'd have asked me 2 years ago, it would have been tea.
Yes, being
Yeah.
from England, I would assume that.
Mhm.
Early bird or night owl?
Early bird,
Yeah,
definitely. I'm in bed by 8:30.
I gotcha. And music or silence when you're creating?
Music or documentary or yeah.
I'm usually listening to a podcast.
Mhm.
And so people can find your work, your classes, your community on pixelquilts.com, correct?
Mhm. Instagram or Facebook or TikTok, it's just at Pixel Quilt.
And I'm connected with her if anybody wants to go and find her that way.
Okay.
And do you have anything coming up? Any shows coming up for this year? Or anything you want to talk about? It's okay if you don't. I just
Yeah, no, I've got a big old teaching stint in that I'm teaching not only Pixel quilt classes, but I'm also teaching quilt dresses. And then we do a class that combines another of my passions, which is I have an in-home micro bakery and I make
If
sourdough.
you haven't already,
And
please
so
like
I
and
actually do a
subscribe.
class
Feel free
that's
to
sourdough and
nominate
stitches,
yourself
and
or
I teach
someone
the
you know
process,
as
the
our next
hands-on
guest.
process of
Thank
sourdough,
you for
and they
being a
all go
part of
home
our
with their
creative
own
community.
sourdough
Stay
starter. And we
inspired
do
and keep
pixel
shining
quilts as
bright.
well. So I think that's one of
wow.
my favorite classes because it's just a
Yeah.
little bit of everything. And then I've got some retreats coming up in Hamilton, Missouri for pixel quilts. And no doubt, if anyone wants to learn how to make sourdough, I always bring this stuff with me. And I'm adding more classes as I go to my website as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time today. It was lovely speaking with you. I really enjoyed it. Thanks
Thank
for the
you.
inspiration.
Thank you.